Hi, and welcome back to the Mary Trump Hour of Power. I'm Brian Karam, here sitting in for Mary again. Thank you for having me. So let's get started. We're a little late, but let's get started. Inflation, rumination, a lack of cooperation, and Halloween is upon us. The Fed is cutting rates. Trump pushes forward with his arc to Trump, and the obliteration of the East Wing of the White House. The government shutdown is guaranteeing more people will go hungry. SNAP benefits could be released, but Puff Donnie would rather see people suffer. Meanwhile, he's happily bombing more boats in the Eastern Pacific Ocean while screaming, he's the peace president. Hey, let's dive in. Well, first of all, the big news from the central bank. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, it's coming, right? As CNN reported, the Federal Reserve announced it's cutting interest rates by a quarter of a percentage point. This is the second time this year the central bank has lowered borrowing costs. As the move lowers the benchmark interest rate to 3.75 to 4% from 4%, these figures determine the costs Americans pay for a wide range of loans, including mortgages and credit cards. The Washington Post reports that the Fed is, quote, seeking to steady a weakening labor market as a month-long government shutdown has clouded its view of the economy, and officials are, quote, increasingly worried about the state of the labor market. Major companies such as Amazon and UPS are among those that announced mass layoffs this week, and the federal shutdown continues to weigh on the labor market with trickle-down effects for federal contractors. You know, it's kind of funny, isn't it, that some of the people who have contributed Donnie the most are the ones that are cutting labor? Yeah, it's always fun, isn't it? Meanwhile, Federal Chair Jerome Powell delivered a statement explaining causes of rising inflation. Take a look at the clip.
Higher tariffs are pushing up prices in some categories of goods, resulting in higher overall inflation. A reasonable base case is that the effects on inflation will be relatively short-lived, a one-time shift in the price level. But it is also possible that the inflationary effects could instead be more persistent, and that is a risk to be assessed and managed.
Did you catch the first part about how tariffs are raising the problem, is part of the problem? Of course they are. Even Ronald Reagan, the creator of supply side trickle down economics, understood that tariffs are in fact a bad thing, but that doesn't keep Donald Trump from tanking the economy as long as the richest among us continue to do well. And this today is a response to that. Meanwhile, drama continues over Donald's obscene demolition of the East Wing of the White House. The Guardian reports that Donald has fired all 6 members of the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts. This independent governing body is responsible for reviewing and approving federal architecture and design projects. Donald took this unprecedented action after members of the group voiced concerns over his White House ballroom project and the wonderful Arc de Trump plan. You can't make this shit up. Anyway, the commissioners received emails dismissing them from their jobs on Tuesday morning. Of course they did. A White House official told NBC that the Trump regime plans to appoint new members who are, quote, more aligned with President Trump's America First policies. Somebody want to explain to me what those America First policies are? Because so far it only seems to be Trump first. And it's disgusting. And never mind the fact that the East Wing wasn't supposed to be touched and is going to be rebuilt at twice the size of the current White House. I'm waiting for him next year after the midterms, if he's successful, to knock down the West Wing and build a Trump Tower and casino. But anyway, and now here are the latest updates on the government shutdown, which is finishing its 29th day. Exactly 1 week from today, it will be the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Right now, it's simply the second longest in U.S. history. Both of them come under Donald Trump. USA Today reports that lawmakers are scrambling to prevent a lapse in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. Those are the food coupons that you get. Funding for this crucial food program is set to expire this Saturday, November 1st. The $9.2 billion in monthly food stamp funding has become one of the most urgent issues in the ongoing standoff. Agricultural Secretary Brooke Rollins has said the USDA doesn't have enough funds to sustain the program into November. This contradicted previous department guidance and prompted lawsuits from 25 states. More than 42 million Americans rely on SNAP. That's 12% of the population rely on food stamps, and they're not going to be available. Legislators from both parties have introduced standalone bills to temporarily fund the program, but all have failed due to the shutdown deadlock. In fact, Congress simply isn't working, folks. That's it. This Congress no longer exists. We only have an executive branch and a judicial branch who's backing up Donald Trump. Two federal prosecutors were, speaking of this, two federal prosecutors were placed on leave today by Donald Trump's Department of Justice. Of course they were. And given the details of the story, it's impossible to see the move as anything other than political retribution by the Trump regime. Here's ABC News with the details of the situation.
Sources tell ABC News the Justice Department is suspending two prosecutors who described the January 6th attack on the Capitol as, quote, a mob of rioters. Sources say Carlos Valdivia and Samuel White were told they would be placed on leave just after filing a sentencing memo for a pardoned rioter in a separate case.
Yeah, and that separate case that you mentioned stemmed from charges related to a June 2023 arrest near the home of former President Barack Obama, where he was found. This person was found in possession of two guns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, as well as a machete. So it came in the sentencing memo. And why prosecutors referred to January 6th is because the person who they were recommending be sentenced was actually one of those who was pardoned by President Trump over his involvement in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Now, the prosecutors in the sentencing memo described the attack on the Capitol as being carried out by thousands of people, comprising a mob of rioters. Now, they were put on, or they were at least told they would be put on administrative leave today. On Wednesday, we're told by sources they were locked out of their devices, were not allowed to come into the office. If they were immediately told to leave. And that is because of the way they described January 6th in this sentencing memorandum.
Let me be blunt. It was a riot. I was there. I stood there. You saw the pictures of the people on the wall. I nearly got beaten up by them myself. There was nothing about this that was a picnic. There was nothing about this that was anything other than riotous. It was an attempted insurrection, folks. And to fire a member of the Justice Department for accurately describing the events as they occurred is not only anathema to the First Amendment, but to human rights and to just common sense. Why would you be upset about it being described other than it was unless you were behind it and wanted to support it? Had the insurrection been successful, he would have called it a new revolution. As it is, he is ready to call those people who protest in Chicago against ICE, who have merely stood up and shouted and been shot at with rubber bullets and pepper spray by members of ICE. They're the ones that are the violent, reactionary, riotous insurrectionists. And the people who actually walked into the Capitol, the People's House, on January 6th and spread feces and stole things from the Capitol, got people killed, those people, yeah, he won't call it what it is because he's embarrassed of the fact that he was behind it. And up is down and down is up. In another authoritarian news, The Guardian reports this week that a Pentagon memo went out ordering the National Guards of all 50 states and U.S. territories to establish quick reaction forces. These QRFs will be trained in riot control tactics. This includes use of batons, pepper spray, body shields, and tasers, like ICE is using right now on its own citizens, American citizens, not just violent criminals, not just violent criminal immigrants, but just regular citizens, including a 67-year-old man who apparently had his ribs broken this week because he was tackled by ICE. They were told, the National Guard were told to, quote, be available for rapid national deployment in order to quell, quote, civil disturbances. Around 23,000 National Guard troops, that's roughly 500 per state, will be trained. And this is in response to Donald's August executive order, which directed the Guard to combat crime in Washington, D.C., and to create quick response forces. Yeah, baby. Teams like these have been created in the past, right, to respond to emergencies like mass shootings or natural disasters. But Donald is creating these forces to unleash on American civilians, ramping up his manufactured war on immigrants and cities. And folks, we all know where this is going. You only have to know the Neil Young song, "4 Dead in Ohio," right? This is what happens. You're going to get a nervous young member of the National Guard who isn't trained to be a police cadet, who isn't trained to be a police force, but is part of a National Guard who may jump off. This only ends up in violence unless we change it. Anyway, concerns about Donald's mental fitness continued full steam ahead this week. Yeah, baby, he's gone. On Sunday, he posted this photo of himself on his failing social media site. Take a look. You gotta love this. Quote, "I want to thank Donald Trump for working like a dog for no money to save a country that doesn't appreciate his sacrifice. Thank you, Mr. President." He posted this and responded to it, thanking himself. I got a couple of questions here. Donald, you're talking about yourself in the third person. Are you okay? Can you describe what a TV is anymore? Can you identify one in a picture? He's working like a dog for no money. Bull. He gets paid. Now, he claims that he's giving his money away to charity, and he hasn't proven that yet. And I questioned him every year during his first administration, and they often hid where he was sending the money until he actually found some place that he could hide it. He won't even respond to that question. Now, I've never gotten a response. What has he done with his first year's salary? And he says he's saving a country that doesn't appreciate his sacrifice. Well, what the hell have you sacrificed? Hey, Don, what have you sacrificed? I don't know. Sleep? That's your job. Do your job. Anyway, also this week, Donald bragged to the press about acing an IQ. This one I love. Acing an IQ test, except it seems he was referring to what was actually a dementia screening process he'd had at Walter Reed Medical Center. To make matters more embarrassing for him, he called Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jasmine Crockett low IQ. Neither of these women are ones to let something like this slide, which you kind of got to love. AOC clapped back with a tweet asking if he'd been asked to draw a clock during his visit. All right, I said TV. She says clock. Test doctors used to diagnose dementia. Crockett clapped back on CNN, and that was pretty good. Watch it here.
What is his IQ? Because he is constantly talking about, he doesn't even know what a low IQ is. He don't even know which scores are low. And I can guarantee you that whatever score, if he's taken one anytime recently, I'm sure that his qualifies as low. Listen, he's never been known to be an Einstein. This is not a guy who got in on merit when it came to going to college. This is someone who, but for him being born with a silver spoon, probably wouldn't have got into anybody's institution, unlike me. So, I am not worried about that. And I wish people would look at the fact that you have a president of the United States who consistently is obsessing over two women of color that are members of the House. You are the president. You have a lot more power than we do, but obviously you consistently feel threatened. And that is why we have seen, the attacks on black women in general from this administration. I don't know what black woman hurt him in his past, honey, but it is really taken him through it. But I really wish, for the sake of this country and honestly for the sake of the world, that he would focus on his real job and stop worrying about me.
Well, the clip says that Crockett says he's no Einstein. Hell, he can't even spell Einstein. He's lucky to spell his own name. I'm sure he has an auto pen to do it. Anyway, Halloween is this Friday, folks, and we want to see your resistance-themed costumes and decorations. Please submit photos and videos to the email address on the screen somewhere, and we'll choose a few favorites to show on the air. I will be dressed as a priest because I'm going to go to the White House and try to perform an exorcism. Anyway, we'll choose a few favorites to show on the air, and we can celebrate one of the greatest holidays of the year while fighting for our democracy. Happy Halloween, folks. I hope it all works out for you. Or if you're so inclined, happy Dia de Los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. With that, we've reached today's emotional support moment, and God knows we need it. In honor of the festive fall season, we've selected a clip of something soothing. Autumn rain. Wrap yourself in a waterproof poncho, enjoy the view, and have a great night. Well, I would love to see that in person, but what can I tell you? There we go. Killed that one line. It keeps me calm, but it also, every time I see the rain, I just think of rain in Washington, D.C. on the reflecting pool and wish the Congress was in session to do something, but they're not. With that, let's go to your comments. Lexi, what you got for me, baby? Donna Pascarello became a YouTube member. Thank you, Donna, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Amanda Carlos 1576 became a YouTube member. Thank you, Amanda. We appreciate that very much. Geraldine from New York, member for 1 month. Yay, 1 month. Congratulations. The GOP is not healthy for children and other living things. Thank you, Mission RD100. Not only is the GOP not healthy for children and other living things, they're not even really healthy for themselves. It's disgusting to see people deny vaccines, deny science. I go back to what Carl Sagan said. We've got to move past religion to get people to think about being healthy for themselves and other living things. The scientific method, using that, the GOP would have to embrace it at some point in time. One would hope. What else we got? Gifted. Oh, Geraldine. I'm going to say Konecki. Gifted one Mary Trump media membership. I guess you're from New York. Maybe not. What else we got? Gally Gator. Can he just go to North Korea while he's there and stay? I wouldn't be surprised if that's where he ends up retiring. He loves Kim Jong. He loves the area for some reason. God only knows why. Richard Goodman, $4.29, $10. Thank you, Richard. So apparently Donnie fired the entire Commission of Fine Arts, the group that was supposed to review the plans for the Orc and the ballroom. They are slowly stripping away any oversight of their king. No, they're not slowly. I disagree with it, Richard. They've done it. They've accomplished it. They've accomplished all of that. Congress isn't even working right now. And to be honest, remember when Donald Trump said all he really needed was the one big, beautiful bill? Well, if that's the case, as he said, if that's all he needs, why would he ever want government to come back? Because the fact of the matter is, if Congress comes back, the very first thing that the House will do will bring up the three, say these three things with me, and maybe like Beetlejuice, he'll appear. Epstein files, Epstein files, Epstein files. Did it show up? Anyway, that's why they won't ever come back. The longer Donald Trump can keep the government shut down, the better it is for Donald Trump. There is no oversight. Congress is hapless, hopeless, and feckless. And Donald Trump has run roughshod over all of them, and the Supreme Court's in his hip pocket. So stripping away any oversight, it's done. There is no oversight. But thank you for the $10. Midas Cheryl, I love you, Midas Cheryl. Brian, why do you think Kim Jong-un isn't meeting with Donnie? Is he done with Donnie or embarrassed to be seen with him? Well, it could be because Donnie didn't pay him or he didn't pay Donnie. There's money involved in some of this. Everything with Donald Trump is transactional. So if somebody isn't meeting with him, that either means that Donnie didn't get what he wanted or they didn't get what they wanted out of Donnie. Or it could mean they just broke up and he's on to other lovers. Ms. Brightside gifted one Mary Trump media membership. Thanks, Ms. Brightside. And is that a cat lady? Love the cat. Reminds me of one I had. Traveling bibliophile. How does America First have anything to do with a grotesque and gaudy ballroom and cheap knockoff of a French military memorial? Well, traveling bibliophile, that's a damn good question. And I'll tell you what, it has nothing to do with America First. It has to do with Donnie First. And let's be honest, everything about Donald Trump is Donald First. Every breath he takes, every move he makes, I don't want to be watching him. Sorry, I stole it from Sting. But the bottom line is, this is all about Donald, always has been about Donald, always will be about Donald. Kelly, HO878. I was laid off via email in April, followed by a Zoom meeting where I was told it would only be 15 minutes. Man, I apologize to you for that. I didn't have anything to do with it, but what happened to treating people like people? And I'm assuming this is from the government. You were laid off, or if not, that's even worse. No, it's being laid off by Zoom meeting is horrible to begin with, but being laid off after a Zoom meeting and you only be 15 minutes and you're still without the work, dude, sweetheart, whoever, I can't even relate. I got to tell you, that's got to bug us all. Right now, they're holding back SNAP benefits. They're people who call themselves Christian are sitting there holding back SNAP benefits so that people will go hungry. What happened to this country? How do you get laid off by a Zoom meeting? What happened to talking to people face to face and then lying, saying it would only be 15 minutes and now you're still without employment? Good Lord. At some point in time, we took a bad turn in this country. What else you got, Lexi? Virginia, I hope I can, Acevedo? I hope I pronounced it right. 203. Without the SNAP benefits going back into the system, America will lose more than they're given. Well, the fact of the matter is you got to feed people. End of story. What is that? 12% of the people in the United States live. There are people who work at Walmart, owned by billionaires. There are people who work for Amazon, owned by a billionaire, who also have to have SNAP benefits because they don't make enough money. All the billions that these people make, you think you could spare a little bit to make sure that the people who work for you have a working wage, a living wage? Remember, as originally conceived, the minimum wage was the minimum wage determined to be needed for people to have a living wage. It was a living wage. Today, you can't live on minimum wage. You can't afford health care, and you sure as hell can't afford to eat. Thank you, the oligarchs. Susan Thompson, 5142, $10. Brian, what is your most vivid memory of January 6th? You were there, am I correct? Yes, Susan, I was there. My most vivid memory, I've told people this several times, so I'll say it again. I was standing, you've probably seen it, the wall. People were climbing up the wall, right, near the Capitol. And I looked at them. I'm standing 10, 15 feet away from them. And I said, hey, morons, there's steps on either side. You're crawling up the wall. Somebody's going to fall and break their neck. And sure enough, someone fell. Now, I don't know if they broke their neck or not, but they were hauled away. Meanwhile, 6 of these idiots, I had already watched them beat one reporter, take their camera, smash it to the ground, throw them to the ground. They had been threatening reporters. So 6 of them turned around as if blaming me for their own problems. I tried to warn them. I was merely doing my job as a reporter, reporting the danger of what they were doing. They turned around and came after me. I held out my press pass, which said Playboy on it. And I said, hey, fellas, I'm not like the rest of the press. I'm with Playboy. And they all stopped. And this one guy came up. I thought he was sniffing my credentials. He looked at him real close and he goes, can you get me into the mansion? I said, sure. And he turns around to the other 6 guys. He goes, nothing to see here, fellas. Let's go. And then ran off. Didn't give me his name or anything. That was the most vivid personal memory of being threatened. And then I actually watched people that I know. Harry Dunn was one of them, trying to just hold the line as they were swarmed by people whose intentions were not peaceful. There was nothing peaceful about this. I was sitting there in the ellipse when I heard Giuliani said trial by combat, and Donald Trump promised to go up to the Capitol and march with them. Of course, Secret Service demanded that he didn't, and he did not. But they stormed the Capitol. Their full intention was to make sure that the election wasn't certified. And I watched. I was an eyewitness to watching the Capitol Police that day saved every member of Congress, including the Republicans who today call those people the enemies of the people. And they did their job. And what the Capitol Police did that day should never be forgotten. They saved that Capitol. It got looted, but it wasn't burned. It wasn't destroyed. There were few losses of life because of the Capitol Police. Black Cat E2X. That was an embarrassing display of cognitive decline while he was in Japan. I have seen an amazing cognitive decline with Donald Trump since the first Donald Trump regime. In fact, I could tell you there were several times when he looked at one of the things that stands out in my mind the most was him yelling at me to sit down. I was out in the what used to be the Rose Garden and now is Mar-a-Lago North. I was in the Rose Garden during a press conference when he actually had press conferences. And please, let's not call what he does in this administration a press conference, because they're not. It's press availability, it's pool sprays, but he hasn't had a full press conference yet. But he did in the first regime. And I was sitting in the second row of that regime, and he started yelling at me to sit down. He goes, sit down, sit down. I go, I am sitting down. And he goes, oh, okay, what you got? Completely lost. For a moment, just froze. Donald Trump hasn't been well since the end of his first administration. And they bring him out whenever they can jack him up with enough, either jack him up with enough Adderall or calm him down with enough sedatives to make him amble and ramble on like he used to do. And if you notice, everything he says these days, none of it, or rarely any of it, makes sense. But he can go on and on like he's going to a rally. And remember, he used to get his jollies going to rallies. He doesn't do that anymore. He'll come into a pool spray or into the East Room, or if he's overseas in the castle or whatever. But Donald Trump is not the man that he used to be. And it is embarrassing for all of us. Rhonda Price, 5202, Jasmine or AOC would mop the floor with Trump. Well, I got news for you. I think Caroline Leavitt could mop the floor with Donald Trump, and she's a moron. I don't think it's too hard. You know, I would say my dog is probably more cognizant, more cogent than Donald Trump. My dog at least knows when to stop eating and get some sleep and knows how to perform like he's, has his own self-interest at heart. Donald Trump, I'm not so sure about. He can't spell Einstein, but he can spell Epstein, maybe. I don't know if he can spell Epstein, but, I had a source of mine, and I'll tell this because I won't give the specifics. But at the end of the day, there was a rumor, and I think Michael Wolff wrote about it in one of his books, that it was a land deal that separated Epstein and Trump and ended their bromance. They were supposedly fighting over property. The only thing is that now I've been told by a couple of people close to the situation that it wasn't necessarily over real estate property, but maybe people that they thought of as property. And in fact, that it was Epstein who broke up with Donald, not the other way around, because the convicted pedophile found Donald Trump's behavior morally reprehensible. Just think of that. Think of that for a second. A pedophile thought that Donald Trump was morally reprehensible. Makes sense to me. What else we got? Question from Sean Bumstead at 1250, in relation to Dagwood. Question, do you think there are members of the cabinet that think the 25th Amendment should be enforced, but don't say anything because they are afraid to lose their jobs or go to prison by Trump. I have sources inside the White House who have begun whispering about the 25th Amendment. I don't think that you will see anything done on the 25th Amendment until either he loses the 2026 midterm elections or he ends up falling over in his soup and babbling incoherently like a cicada on meth. If it gets to the point where he's simply, where it's a public, like he walks into, like, I don't know, he walks into the East Room during a bilat with the King of England and drops his trowel and, begins sputtering uncontrollably. Yeah, then we might see the 25th Amendment. But these people all have sold their soul to Donald Trump. And even if they don't, and let's face it, many of them I know because they told me don't like him. The fact of the matter is they're not going anywhere because they have sold their soul to Trump and they're damn scared what would happen if he's not there. J.D. Vance, if he can pull the strings together, would already have done so. The next impetus to do that will be after the 2026 midterm elections. That would be interesting. If they lose, if there's a big loss, and then you would see impeachment proceedings almost immediately, and you could see a conviction. I know there are people in the Senate that are upset, but even without that, you still could see the 25th Amendment invoked if they determine that they just lost so bad they no longer need Donnie. And that's what it boils down to. If they need Donnie, he'll be there. Mendenos, $2. Thank you, Mendenos. Don't need religion to be a kind, decent person. Exactly, you don't. All you have to do is be a person and have a little empathy for others. Like I said, it was Carl Sagan who said we need to advance beyond religion, using the scientific method to gain knowledge of the universe instead of believing that a deity had issued what is the be-all, end-all of rules and they can't be amended or changed, and they were given 2,000 years ago and they are perfect as they were given, although they've changed 6 or 7 times since I've been alive. The wording in the Bible changes every time they put out a new edition. What does it really mean? Well, it means people are involved. What else we got? Susan, back again with $10. Thank you again, Susan. Send in your scary good Halloween resistant photos to info@marytrumpmedia.com. Send in decorations, costumes, anything that combines Halloween and resistance to the regime. That could be funny and interesting. I can't wait to see that. I've got one I actually want to answer, Lex, while I'm here. I saw this by GG1982. Those individuals that are supposed to be ICE are really the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and white nationalists. It's sad that all the other countries are laughing at us. I do know there's a couple of points that message brings up. I do know this. Overseas, reporters are telling me that they no longer refer to it as a Republican Party, but as to the American Fascist Party. And that's in several places, several countries that are our allies. And yes, indeed, there is speculation. There has been wide speculation, and not only wide speculation, but some confirmation that at least some of the people in ICE are members of Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and white Christian nationalists. So with that said, I do want to thank everybody. I do want you to have a wonderful Halloween. I think it's always good to have a laugh and enjoy yourself, or happy Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Karam. You can catch me, and I would love it if you give me a follow at Reporter's Notebook on Substack. My column comes out every Friday in Salon. And please hit the button, do the check mark, all of that. And oh yes, host of JustAskTheQuestion.com. We had Jackie the Joke Man on this week telling us his inside stories about Donald Trump, including a couple of Jeff Epstein stories. That's always fun. So I want to thank everybody. And thank you, Maria. And thank you, Night Owl from Ohio. I appreciate being here. It's always fun to be with you guys. It's always a joy. So thanks for having me, and we will catch you next time.